everyone. Wow. What a great week, right? So why is it important that we talk about acquisition and making sure that we're as agile as we need to be? I think this symposium proves it. And the way I think about it is, and it's Thursday so we can be friends, you want to make money, I want to solve problems, and we both care about the country. So we have shared purpose in this. I have a wonderful panel that I will introduce in a second who can talk to you about a number of very specific issues, but I want 2 seconds for myself. The first I mentioned yesterday, if you heard our conversation with the NGA leadership team, and that is, I think the thing that we can best do to be a great organization at acquisition is to know for sure who we are, what we want to do, where we want to go, and be able to articulate that clearly. And then to have the talent in place that when we receive proposals, we can judge whether they are going to meet what we want so that we are both on the same page when we start any endeavor. So one, mission first. The second is, many of you know that I just sent out a note to the workforce on acquisition. And the purpose of that note was really to inspire my officers to recognize that we have myriad tools available to us to achieve our shared purpose. And we should use each one of them. Not the ones that we're used to, not the ones that we have historically used, not the ones that we were taught to use, but the ones that are available to us, and to consider what each moment demands and how we can best use those things that are available to us in order to accomplish that objective. I did not create anything new. I did not introduce some magical FAR. Rather, it was to say, use what's available. And I will tell you it's having effect, because what I wanted to do was to get people to not just pursue this as a rote exercise, but as a conscious choice. And we don't have every solution, but I have many more people engaged. I have one last disclaimer before I set us off and talk about some real things, and that is to remind you that you do want, no matter how much you want us to be agile, no matter how much you want us to be faster, no matter how many more businesses that you want and we want to engage in what we do, you do want me to be transparent and fair and rigorous. You do. It's one of the best things about the government. We sometimes ascribe the negative attributes to those things, but I will tell you that process has some greatness to it, and that ensures that it is a level playing field. And so while I am devoted to the quest of making us accessible and available and responsive, and as a result, delivering capability, what I will never sacrifice is what you count on from us, and that is open, fair, and transparent. So with that, I'm not that interesting, except in the extent to which I can bring great talent to the stage. I have 3 people on my panel. The first is Mike Geggus. I hope most of you know him, because I never see him anymore because he's out there with you. He's our industry innovation advocate. The second is Karyn Hayes-Ryan. She's our component acquisition executive. She is also an incredible firebrand and one of the most creative minds that I think we have on how we can go about the business of acquisition and how to introduce new capabilities. And the last is not only a steely-eyed professional, but a dear long-term friend, is Nicole Pierce, our senior procurement executive. And I will tell you that we are incredibly lucky at NGA to have these officers and their skill and their dedication. So my experience is, if they tell me no, it only lasts for a little bit of time until we can find our way to yes, but they never say no casually. So with that, and we'll have time for questions at the end. You should do your worst. And to give you something to do, What I've decided we're going to hand out to each of you is I have created an incredibly formal piece of paper, and it is an NGA acquisition scorecard. Director. Awesome. And it's for you. And it has two pieces to it. Number one is to grade us on the quality of our RFPs, the effectiveness of our interaction and our timelines. And then it has an opportunity for you to rate the importance of various criteria of the acquisition process in importance to you. So tell us how we're doing and tell us your value proposition. And here's my promise to you. We will collect it. We will make the results of this available. And next year, if you come back, we'll do it again, and we'll see if we're doing better. Now, don't get too distracted, because good data is coming. But we'll collect these at the end. So with that, first question for you, Mike. And I mentioned that I never see you anymore. And that's because your job is to be out there and be an interlocutor between the organization and our industrial partners, and in fact to be a little bit away from the system so you could tell both sides of the truth. Mm-hmm. But I know another thing that you're really working on is transparency. Mm-hmm. So talk to us about what you've been doing and where you think we can go in terms of transparency and availability of our organization.
Great. This venue, for one, is probably a really great example and a demonstration of that transparency, and the fortunateness of having it here in Washington, D.C. gives us the opportunity for tremendous engagement. So we're going to be more engaged with creating transparency in those large groups such as USGIF, AFCEA, and INSA, and as a matter of fact, some of them, particularly USGIF, is proposing a NGA Action Advisory Working Group as a mechanism to help give us feedback and improve that transparency with industry. There's a multitude of other forums and those activities going on, so I'm trying to get engaged with those. So, please send me your cards and letters and help me engage in those activities, and we'll get people contributing and connecting. Another activity where we're improving transparency is through monthly engagements in smaller, more intimate groups with industry, with our component acquisition executive Karyn and our senior procurement executive Nicole and myself, and we seek out your feedback. Those have been really great in getting your sentiment, your ideas, and helping us make adjustments and understanding the challenges between working the two of us. And most important, the individual interaction. I think having access, and that's where you can take advantage of me as your conduit into NGA. I'm in a very fortunate position to be able to bring you in, and you can give me your feedback. There's no attribution, and connect that information back into the agency. It's helping us to make adjustments to what we're doing, and I can also help in connecting you with the rest with others in the agency to help you in your success. But I think that's the primary.
One of the things that we try and do with our RFPs is to put out draft RFPs. We send those out in part to get honest to goodness comment back on whether we're hitting the mark, whether it makes sense to you, whether it seems goofy as all get out, or we take compliments too, this is the best thing since sliced bread. But I encourage you, and I think either Mike or Nicole talk about, this really is a tool. If we put out a draft RFP and you miss the opportunity to comment, don't worry about hurting our feelings. Hurting our collective feeling is us engaging in something that we neither one fully understood or wanted. If you've ever seen a video called the Abilene Paradox, it's where everyone goes down the road that neither one wanted. So we really view the draft RFP process as one of those ways. So Nicole, how do you feel about how we're using that process to good advantage?
So we do, almost with every RFP, issue it and ask for industry comment. I would say that there's a reluctance in some ways on industry's part to be honest with us and to share their feedback. One, potentially, by the way they ask the question, they may reveal an approach that they plan to take, and by doing so, they give up some competitive advantage. Or two, as Sue said, they don't want to hurt our feelings. We're tough, we can take it. One of the things that I'm encouraging my folks to do is explore something that I did way long ago in my career. It's been part of the federal acquisition regulation for some time, but for some reason people are reluctant and scared to use it, and that is a one-on-one information exchange during the time of the draft RFP, where the vendors are coming in and we sit across from them and we have an honest exchange. I believe we've used that successfully on a couple of our programs, and I'll encourage its broader use. Industry days, focus on allowing industry to see who else is in the room and maybe make partnerships. We had an industry day last week that had more than 300 plus people attending. We'll continue to use those forums and share information through that broad scale, but I think the one-on-ones are a better approach for that more intimate conversation about the requirement and what we're trying to get to.
Yeah, and if I could add, folks have been coming to me with feedback on some of the draft RFPs, and the first thing I'll do is urge you to use the process, because it really is the best way to get your feedback into that. But you can always share that information if there's some kind of anxiety. But we're gonna help build and bridge that.
So Nicole, I'm going to come back to you on this one. One of the things that I hear all the time, being the new kid, is that we need to streamline our acquisition process. So talk to me about not only what that means to you and where you think we're going on that.
So there's a couple of things that it means to me. The acquisition process as a whole is not just the contracting process. The contracting process is actually on the back end of everything. So we have to recognize first that acquisition and the acquisition process begins way ahead of that. From the time of an idea to the time it gets out on RFP is a very lengthy time in some cases. At NGA, one of the things I noticed in the first few months that I've been there is that we have a lot of governance processes, a lot of feedback loops that happen before we can issue the RFP out, even in a draft form. We need to collapse that time, and we're working with Sue to basically push decision-making down levels and to streamline the method by which we get things approved. Moving up right now, our acquisition review board process ends right before the RFP is released, and that is the final RFP, not the draft. And at that point, the governance has two choices: approve what's already been written and where we've already engaged with industry, and we've gone a long way. We've spent a lot of resources going back and forth on our requirements, and we've established the RFP, or delaying the program. And the delay would be 6 to 8 months, which puts decision makers in a very awkward point where they kind of have to let things go just because they can't afford the 6 to 8 months. So moving up the review of the acquisition strategy, the broad acquisition strategy that's at the program level and not the contract level, 6 to 9 months before we expect to have to release an RFP will allow some of that feedback to happen much earlier on, and in that streamline the time frame.
Great. Karyn, you're a part of that acquisition process before the contract process. Do you have anything to add to that?
So we are looking a lot harder. We created our fish bones, and we've shared those out via GSM and on the ICR for you to share, but we were starting to look at how we were developing our thought process and our requirements, and we weren't necessarily conveying a lot of that ahead of time. To get your ideas, your opinions, we were trying to do some of that too far internally, and that's some of the other pieces that we've done. Cynthia Mendoza has been focusing on drawing them out, looking at where those requirements are, and making sure that we've got acquisition programs that are going to meet the capabilities without the redundancy and without the the old stovepipe kind of systems that we have in there. So we have tried to force the IT requirements to move, but it's beyond that is other parts of the architecture as well.
Good. So staying with you, Karyn, you can imagine what my memo did and putting mission up front has done in saying that we're going to do whatever it takes. That puts a whole lot of pressure on our acquisition workforce. And what it's doing is it's saying that they have to have critical thinking skills in order to be able to win their way through this with us. So what are we doing to help the critical skills of our acquisition workforce so that they don't mutiny and walk out the door, because that wouldn't serve any of us well?
So 2 years ago, John Golgazian and I kicked off the mission-driven 2B architecture to try to drive mission into where we were going. And it was a couple key leaders, Cynthia, some folks from analysis and other parts. Justin Poole was another big part of it. So we had looked at that and tried to say, okay, we're building a lot of IT, but it's not really for us. We're good at this, but what are we really doing? So we started to put the focus on the mission-driven piece of it and try to bring that into the workforce. And the mission and that user factor is a huge component of Agile. And a couple years ago, we had Agile acquisition, and we switched that to be calling it agency agility, because Agile isn't all about the acquisition professionals. It's not my staff, it's not Nicole's staff, and that's it. It also includes our security folks, it includes our finance folks, it includes our engineers, but most importantly, it also includes our users, and to try to drive the user piece into that. And that's where there's a great timeline associated with them, because it's not bring the user in early, it's bring the user in and never let them go, even after it's been delivered. Agile acquisition was encouraged, it was tolerated, and in some people's mind, it was those crazy people over there that are always into change and the new favorite words and buzzwords and things like that. We've made significant headway. We have put in an Agile training program across NGA. We are encouraging our program management workforce to go out and actually become more familiar with state-of-the-art. Years ago, we were all very, I'll say young, but we were much more current on what the state-of-the-art of technology, and we, NGA, were driving the geospatial capabilities that were out there, and today we're not necessarily the drivers. Google and others are out there. Everybody is doing geolocation. So we need to get more familiar with that, so we're setting up education and academic programs to teach folks for all of those pieces, trying to encourage all of that continuous learning.
Great. So this is really for Nicole and Karyn, but Nicole, I'm going to force you to start on this one. So the Deputy Director blithely sent out a memo saying that we were going to use a whole range of processes, from GSA to all sorts of. Talk to us about the kinds of acquisitions and acquisition avenues that both NGA has used and that we're looking to use now that will help the general quest of us being open and available to all the best capabilities in a time frame that we can use them.
Sure. So in addition to the traditional Part 15 competitive source selections, we are engaged currently in a fairly large effort using the GSA schedule for our corporate applications maintenance support. We've issued some broad area announcements that provide a basic idea of what we're looking for or a problem we're trying to solve, and we look for ideas. We look for the best of those ideas and fund them a little bit to get going and to have white papers delivered where we know better where we're headed. So broad area announcements, another one. We do have other transaction authority. We don't use that very often. There has to be a specific use case for it. But we have a lot of different avenues. We can use GWACs that other agencies have issued that allow for ordering across the government. iSight, we have enterprise providers within the iSight program where, of course, the joint DTE Program Management Office with DIA. So we issue contracts. We, NGA, sometimes issues contracts on behalf of the IC, and other times we're using contracts that the IC has let. I think the key thing is for us to NGA program managers and analysts and other constituents to understand what it is that they need and what's available in the marketplace, and we will find a way to get it. We will find the most appropriate way, and in some cases, we got to let the competitive market forces bear out and actually do that traditional Part 15 source selection. When we do use GSA and others, we need to streamline. This is a part where I'll say I'm going to give myself or ourselves a C, maybe even a D+. We tend to use the same formal bureaucratic processes and apply them even when they're not necessary. So from a task order perspective, when we do have multiple award IDIQs out there, we tend to make the task order competitions as complicated as the original base. We do not need to do that. When we use GSA, we also don't need to do that. So we're pushing on that end.
I like that. So just so you have some sympathy for Nicole and the whole team, NGA is very excited about the potential of GitHub. Then you get your deputy director reading things, and I see that there have been small towns that have used GitHub even for small procurements, or using it as part of a BAA or an RFI process. Can you all think that we'd ever go that way?
So we are doing something similar. So part of our piece is we have our GEOINT Solutions Marketplace, or GSM. Robert's talked about that a couple of times already today. But last year in April at the GEOINT Symposium, I introduced our GEOINT Solutions Marketplace, said we were going to be doing it. I think some of you were really excited and some of you didn't really trust us. So we have it, it's out there. It's an online exchange where we are identifying our tools, our capability needs, any kind of gaps that we are seeing, and asking for your help. We've identified 22 specific capabilities, 9 initiatives that are out there saying, hey, what ideas do you have? What things do you have? The important part about that is we're asking for you to show us what you have, not what you can do or can develop, because we are looking for that rapid insertion of that capability. We want to be able to have our users test it out, say, yes, this is great, this is exactly what I want, or they will engage directly with the industry partners and say, well, I would rather you do this or more of that as we go across that. As we're doing that, we also have our developer depot and our GitHub where we're putting pieces out there. So in the developer depot, we're actually providing our API for anybody out there. If you don't do business with NGA, but you'd like to, you can write a white paper, or you can look at what our API is and say, oh, I can do this, so I can build into NGA and meet their specs and do these operational aspects. You can look at what we're putting out there at hackathons via GitHub. I presume most of you had already heard from Ray Bauer earlier this week, but we are using that significantly. From the GSM, we have made a very small, I'll say, procurement activity. And it's not nationally intended for our large-scale development. It's really for what do you have today that's so unique or so specialized that we could go in and use this. For something like that, if we have things that it would cost us more money to have the meeting to discuss whether we wanted it, it might be a good idea to just buy it and say, okay, can we use this? Can we put it into our architecture? Does it scale? Will it meet our needs? So we are doing things like that. We're looking for all of these innovative ideas. Doesn't mean we don't want to do competition. It doesn't mean that you come in with a great idea and poof, you're going to get, a multi-million-dollar award on activities. But if you have something that exists today, it makes it a lot more effective for us to look at the demo, have users try it, play with it, and then bring it into our system much quicker.
So you all asked so many questions. I'm going to turn to the ones that you offered and get ready. Are you loose, team? Because even though lots of them said Sue on them, the likelihood that Sue's going to answer any of these is vanishingly small, since I control the questions. That's why they call it the secretary in the Communist Party. Okay, so here we go, visibility. The topic is visibility, and also known as transparency. Is there ever a state that we can envision offering insight into where an RFP is in the timeline? In other words, why not publish the current and accurate status and show gates, migration of the RFP from gate to gate? What do we think?
So we do use the the knack to publish out our schedules. The problem is we publish them once a month, and a lot happens in that month. The other thing is I talked earlier about the governance process taking us a long time to get through. When we have to pre-brief for the deputy director, schedules are often not something that we can control. I'm just saying it the way it is, right?
Nice. What happens at GEOINT stays at GEOINT.
And Sue's really good about getting a NARB in front of her where I just kind of slip the piece of paper and she says, is this a good idea? And I say, yep. And she says, are you sure? And I say, yep. And then she'll sign. But the problem is getting to that point takes a very long time. And that, by and large, is some of the reason why our acquisitions get delayed. The other thing is we're in a time of change. The direction that the director and the deputy director are setting is quite different than the direction we've been on for years. And there's going to be fits and starts during this time. We may have a program manager that's worked very hard on getting a statement of work and a statement of objectives and all of the documentation ready to go out on the street with this great idea, only to find out that we want it to morph in a different way. We have that situation ongoing right now. And I know that our schedule said we were going to release the RFP probably next week. It ain't going to happen. But it's the right thing to do. So we will try I know Regina and I have taken an action to maybe update more than once a month and to be more open in those schedule delays and when somebody might expect something different. Again, some of it is outside of our control, and for the right reasons, we're delaying on the release.
Good. So these questions are tremendous, and I will never get to all of them. So if I don't ask yours, it's not that I'm dodging, it's just we won't get to them. Mike, one of the questions is, I'll start with you. Is there a forum through which feedback can be gathered, shared on how the procurement process mechanics are working or not? You all are participating in one of those incredibly clever, high-tech means right now. For example, issues with the ARC, issues with BizOps, concerns about what's requested in cost proposal, not about specific RFP, maybe an industry day or the process as a discussion. I think you mentioned some of it, but go over that again.
Well, yeah, the industry days are a great place to do that, but this proposal for an NGA Action Advisory Group, working group within USGIF can be very beneficial for exactly that, and that is to give us feedback on how the process is working and allow for that, and from a much larger perspective than just, you know, one of these one-on-one meetings that we're doing today. That can also happen too, as well, in the monthly feedback sessions that we have with Nicole, Karyn, and myself. And then there, you know, it's always the opportunity for the one-on-one sessions. But I think our best bet is to formalize some of those groups and take advantage of the power of USGIF and FCA and INSA and use those groups as formal mechanisms.
Yeah, so I'll commit that to you, that we will hold those sessions. But I also encourage you to attend when we have the monthly sessions. Please use those as well. They're slightly different, but they give you an opportunity. I'll take this one because it's a great question, and I might be qualified to answer. Agile innovation is fundamentally dependent upon seamless linkage between program managers and contracts programs control. Yet acquisition in GAT isn't here. Well, kind of, we are in Karyn. Are there any plans to embed contracts and PC into program officers for future acquisitions? I'm not going to talk structure here, but I will say that this topic is one that we're really looking at, is the governance and the streamlining of our acquisition process to make sure that we have all the levers aligned so that we can use them. And you're absolutely right that the program management is an incredibly important part of this process. Both Nicole and Karyn alluded to it when we talked about wanting to move some of the decision making up. Too often we consider the actual contract as the only element of a program, and we need to look at that. And so you're right. This is one of the things that an effective acquisition program will have. And it is one of the things that we're doing right now. Nicole?
I would just comment that while OCS is its own directorate, or KC, key component, that we are segregated in, or I have teams within my directorate that are focused on specific commodities or specific customer bases that they're going to work with hand in hand. So we try to gain that expertise and that relationship that you talked about in the question. It's very key that you have that partnership between the program manager organization and the contracting office so that they come to the creative solutions together.
I think one of the interesting challenges for actually any organization, but certainly in GE right now, that's in the process of pretty big transformation. And we have a lot of them going on. We have just normal evolution of mission. We have eyesight and all that implies. We have GEOINT services, which is an element of each of these. We have a lot of moving parts that I wish could just happen automatically, but they actually require those brains and humans of which Robert spoke. And if we do each one thoughtfully, we'll just choose eyesight for an example. It isn't just moving and rehosting programs in the cloud. It is thinking differently about what those are, deciding whether you want to move all of them, what you do, and then how you, it isn't just refactoring, it's what you want to do there. And these volumetrically, we have a lot going on. So it's an interesting promise to have this moment of incredible transition, not only in actual mission area, all the things we're doing, change our architectural approach, be focused on our acquisition approach with humans that actually have, what do we give them? We give them 3 or 4 hours off a day?
Maybe.
Yeah, something like that. Okay. Karyn, very specific question. Will GSM replace the use of Fed BizOps or the ICARC?
No.
There you go.
No, I think no, it won't. And I mean, there may be, those are for our big development, any of our huge competitive kinds of things. We're going to continue to use the Fed BizOps and the ICARC. The GSM, the GitHub, the Developer Depot, that's for capabilities that you already have today, that exist today, that we might be able to plunk into our operational system.
Great.
And might I mention that Fed BizOps is in the regulations as a shall statement.
She says proudly. Okay, this is for the panel, and I think this is what everyone wants to hear. What is NGA doing to expedite source selection timelines? Can our awards be made faster? I can't read what's written down. Can we do this faster? Why are you being such slugs?
So I don't think we're that slow. We actually did some metrics across the community, and we're not the best, but we're far from the worst. And you know, Nicole and I talk about this a lot, and we go through the different pieces. At one of our monthly sessions, somebody had asked us, what is this source selection? What do you do there all day? As if it's, you know, because, you know, it was for a lot of folks, it really is, it's invisible, but the data is out there, and we had offered to show, here's our generic, not a specific, but a very generic, here's our source selection plan. Here's what we do in source selection. But it's also out there, you can find it, there's several websites that you can just go online and search for those pieces. But we are looking to make sure that we have people that are dedicated, that we have people, because sometimes you get distracted, life happens, your other job is going on, and we're trying to keep people focused on getting those things done. We're trying to make sure in our RFPs that go out, that our sections L&M, those are discriminators. This is what really matters in that acquisition. This is what we really care about, because there's a lot of generic template material out there, and if we allow that to focus in and be part of that RFP, we actually have to have a debate and then a consensus on those criteria. So we're really trying to hunker down on that. We're trying to make sure we have an experienced workforce. The direction I had from our previous deputy director was to make sure that every source selection team was staffed with people that have, half of them that have experience in this, so that we can continue to grow that expertise and start to develop the rhythms and other pieces with that. Anything you want to add?
I would just add that the schedule is often perturbated by factors that are outside of our control, like the number of offers received. We had one that was in the dozens, and you have to give every one of those proposals as much of the scrutiny as you did the first one that you review. So in some ways, the schedules are not our own.
Yeah, I asked the question, and I was tongue-in-cheek the way it was. Is we actually, it costs both of us. The amount of time costs both sides, and we are constantly looking to minimize that time. I go back to where I first said, though, but what we have to do is to make sure that we do it well. And so we will continue to look at ways to really revolutionize it, but there will be limits to it. This is a great question, and this is for everybody. And so, Mike, you're going to go first because you're going to be the guinea pig, but I'd love to hear from each one. Person said, being extremely new to NGA, I can't fill out the scorecard that I handed out on the grounds that they have zero experience, and they wrote zero the way I did with the little null sign through it. How would we rate it?
Oh, wow. Wow. Oh, and I get to be the guinea pig. Wow.
I know, that's because, you're closest to me.
All right, so I have a lot of empathy with everybody, I guess, but because
Oh,
I have
and
to
by
be.
the rating, you're just doing the top half because the bottom half is for their value proposition. This is really just on the first three questions.
So what were
Oh, I'm sorry, you don't have it in front of me? I do. Hold on. So
Robert
the first
didn't
one is the
pass those
quality
out.
of our RFPs, the effectiveness of our industry interactions, and the timeline for source selection. Just ABC,
So the quality of the RFPs.
don't worry, this isn't recorded. They won't,
All right.
they won't remember this.
For the quality of the RFPs, I think we're moving up. Okay, moving up from maybe a D plus or a C minus. I think we're moving up, and I say that in a sense because the feedback that you provided in the past 4 or 5 months, I think, has really changed in kind of the clarity of those and a focus on more of the agility and more outcome based and so I think that one's moving up.
Yeah, so first reactions, just kind of what you'd say, or just give a sense of how we think. And you can either grade us on a curve or grade us straight up.
So effectiveness of our industry actions, I would use this week as my grade point. I think we're doing at least B plus A work. And if you haven't met with an NGA person this week, I don't think you can walk 10 feet without tripping over somebody from NGA. So I think we're out there. We're asking questions and engaged. And then finally, timeline for source selection. I think I would pass on that. I've heard the response I'm getting from industry. It depends. I mean, if you just got the award, those folks are really happy. And
What do you say, Karyn?
I would say for quality of RFPs, I would give us a D. And I think part of that is because we've been so focused on following a template and not looking at the substance of the acquisition. I would say for the effectiveness of industry interaction, I would give us a C. I think we do a lot of meetings with industry. The effectiveness is where I would lower that grade because sometimes I think we talk and we don't necessarily listen. And then the timeline for source selection, having done recently a study across the IC and DoD, I would say we are at a C, maybe even a high C.
All right, Nicole.
So are we grading on a curve?
Oh, leave that to me. Leave that to me. I'm going to curve.
Okay. So I've worked in a variety of organizations. I would say on the RFP quality, if you just look at whether there's consistency in the message of what we're looking for and that we communicate through the RFP the requirements that we're going after, I think we get a C, C+. But what I'm worried about is whether the requirements are what we actually need, and that I'm going to give us a C- to a D. In terms of the industry interaction, I think I can't describe a single organization I've worked for that cares as much about industry as NGA does and spends a lot of time on investing in those relationships. So I think we have a B plus in that regard. Timeliness of source selections, again, it depends. I'm going to give myself or NGA an average grade. Again, there are things in our control that we should be working to better, and that I talked about earlier with the task orders and making sure we're not putting complexity where it doesn't need to be, but I give us a C.
So here's where I get to be proud of NGA, because I'm the new kid. I think those were all real honest answers on an absolute scale. and they reflect our commitment to wanting to be better in each of those. On the quality RFP, you've heard me say put mission first. That's really where it starts, is being sure of what you want to do. It's not an issue of the technical RFP. It's about the clarity of what you want to do, and have you boxed in people's space. Have you really gone with needs and allowed room for innovation solutions, or have you come close to the raggedy edge of a system specification, thereby take out all creativity? But we're doing a lot already. Gary Dunow in our analysis directorate has put people into T in order for this to happen really much better. And you are going to see, so even though I get it, what I see is actual tangible steps to improve that piece of it. Justin is pursuing our approach to GEOINT services, you have an incredibly multidisciplinary team, and it started with a business plan. It didn't start with a specification. So even though I think that's probably true, I see us as stepping out on that. And you should see the results. And you've been really harsh on us on that. And I love it. You ought to hold us. I mean, that's why we set it out there. I agree. I don't think I've been part of an organization that is aggressive about reaching out to industry. The only thing I ask of you is, remember, what we mostly need to hear is your value proposition, not telling us what we need to do. Tell us what you need to have, but don't tell us what we need to do. And remember that we are a system within the government, and you want that. So I can't wait to see what you say, and I can't wait to see what we get back from you next year, because we're on the rise. I can't remember, does this session end at 3 or right now? 3 more minutes, at 3 o'clock? Oh, good, so I have more time. 4 o'clock, whatever.
5 o'clock.
Yeah, stop. Bob,
The beer is
you're a problem
waiting.
child, you always have been. So a question that I got was, what lessons did I learn from In-Q-Tel? So the big lesson I learned from In-Q-Tel is Bernie Gary was a good man, because he was the chief procurement executive at the time, and he offered me a brilliant contracting officer named Sharon Parrish. And I don't believe In-Q-Tel would have happened had it not been for Bernie's decision and Sharon's work. But what they did was perfection, in the sense that they found a way, and they didn't find it within the solution space that we had traditionally looked. And as a matter of fact, the model for In-Q-Tel was a NASA model on how they had gone out on R&D, and it had been effective, it had been used, and they found that model, and then they built after, and they worked very closely. So there's a lot of goodness. We didn't make up laws. We just found the same creative approach. The other thing that made In-Q-Tel happen is we knew exactly what we wanted. We knew exactly how it needed to operate, and so that clarity of what it needed to be allowed the contracting officers and the procurement staff to go out there and find a mechanism to deliver it. So I think it was a magical event. I think what's interesting about it is that work that was done in a very short time, and it really was done by government contracting officers, has stood up to incredible congressional and legal scrutiny. When In-Q-Tel started making people rich, all sorts of questions came in on whether it was proper, and it withstood that. And all of that started with commitment of a government contracting staff to just look creatively at what needed to happen. So that's my big lesson, which is why I have so much confidence in this quest that we have to continue to find good ways to do our work, is because I know the government can do that. Let's see. I have a great question here. For small businesses who want to be active in responding to RFPs, often have limitations because meeting industry days are classified, and even the information discussed is not. For small businesses, this can be difficult. How are we helping encouraging small business participation?
So Sandra Broadnax, she's here somewhere. She is our small business director. She is working with our security to make sure that we can get the clearances and get approvals for a lot of the small businesses. But we are trying to keep all of our industry days at the appropriate level. So yes, our facility may be classified, but you can come into NGA and we will have an unclassified industry day whenever it's possible. As well as GSM. We've been encouraging folks to put their data into GSM. If you have a capability that's out there, we want to know what that is, and we will find a way. If it's something we want to use, we'll find a way to bring it in and get you talking with our users.
And I think one of the other things I would offer is by moving some of the acquisition review board strategy up in the process, if we identify something as a small business set aside, for instance, 6 to 9 months out, we could be working on those clearance issues long before the RFP is actually released, so that when the RFP is released, they can get access to it.
Well, and also engage with the USGIF Small Business Advisory Group, because that could be a powerful way to help share that message and help with the actions.
Here's an angry question.
What?
An angry question. That's okay. We don't shy away from these things. Does still defining the architecture again for geospatial services versus GPAS hinder our acquisition for services? That is, the foundation is still in flux.
Yes.
And the answer is no, it's the same flux, right? It doesn't. GPAS was a great piece of work that was identifying how we needed to have an architecture that would allow the openness that we needed in order to affect the vision that we now call GEOINT services. The biggest difference with this versus GPAS, Geospatial Platform as a Service, if you don't follow NGA every day, is really how we're thinking about the exposure of content and the commonality of the services that we want. But I don't believe that that is the hindrance. I would say quite the opposite, is by pursuing geospatial services with the clarity that we are, and with eyesight in the position it is going to force us to be much more aggressive about the adoption than we might have been if we had just trundled along on the other path. So I don't see that as an impediment, but I understand the question, because it feels like every day if you give it a new name, you're going to have to start all over. This is not one where we started all over. It is one where we think we brought mission clarity to what we wanted to do. And the only real change is the notion of having it be really open and how we wanted to bring in content, not just the internal content, by the way. Justin, did I do okay on that? Okay, good deal. Here we go for the CAE. Does that, you know, what's difficult about this, and you'll just have to hit us up later, either by email or call Mike Geggus. If we didn't answer the question that you were really asking, you can always come back at us. So this is for the CAE. NGA has made great progress in adopting Agile development on multiple contracts. What is NGA doing to scale up the individual Agile efforts into a holistic, enterprise-wide Agile approach?
That's a good one.
And a corollary to that is, can industry participate in your Agile development work?
So, wow, well, yes. So we are moving much more towards Agile, and you'll see that in most of the RFPs that go out. We are actually expecting an Agile response back. And we are looking at different aspects of it, whether it's an IT program or not. We're saying we want an Agile solution, because none of our requirements are going to stand still for the next 5 years of a process. So we are asking for that, each one. But yes, back to that Geo-services acquisition or GEOINT services architecture question. It's a very similar construct. We are looking to put all of these pieces together as a whole, and we are looking to migrate towards the cloud and be more eyesight compliant, and we are looking to rapidly insert technology, and we are trying to reduce any kind of redundancy and capabilities that we have. As far as industry participating with us, yes, for those industry folks that I got to stop by with today, when you started talking Agile, there were a few of you that I was so excited about it. We were like, "Ooh, we're going to come see you because I want a 2-hour conversation on this. You have a great approach. I want to hear about it."
But Karyn, you have Agile training, right? You do.
I do, and so we do have Agile training where we are training our acquisition workforce, and as well as all of the other members of the agency that have that responsibility. We are looking to see which courses industry can take with us. One of them, they definitely got approval for. That's called the Agency Orientation Towards Agility. The agency being the agency, NGA. We had to make that clarification a few times today. But
Is there any other agency?
there's a few others
Exactly.
that might exist, but this is GEOINT Symposium, and NGA is the agency. And so, that class is tailored. We created that for us with some industry partners as we went through that. So definitely our allied partners are taking those classes with us. Two of them are in the room right in front of me here, Rich and Matt. They're sharing that with us.
So I think that was a really great question, a real good opportunity. I think one of the things that happens sometimes is that we each have our own perspectives, and if you've only been in one camp, you tend to look at it, you're well intended, but you tend to look at it for yours. So I think it is a good idea for us to think about not only just having industry days where we share, but if there are actually courses and activities in which we can get engaged together. This is a great question. How will we ensure that the Agile enterprise will result in an environment that enables data-driven decisions for analysis in mission and corporate? So how are we going to ensure that what we're doing from an enterprise perspective is going to result in data-driven decisions?
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's a good one.
That's a great one.
Yeah, so one of our first steps is the identification of a chief data officer. Because it's hard to do data-driven decisions if you don't have the systems that allow you to get to the data across systems that reveal it in interesting ways. And so one of the reasons why we've had a National Geospatial Officer for data standards and management. We've buffed it up to a CDO in part because knowing where your data are, knowing what systems they're in, knowing what you want to do is a real key to being able to go into that data-driven decision environment. So I don't think they are having a good architecture that allows you to expose data across stovepipes and a data management approach and a chief data officer is key to being able to make data-driven decisions because it's just about what you can bring together. It is not all that there is. I know that in our ex-director, we also have business analytics to also be pushing that, and we have a small but fierce data science program. But I think all that comes together when you can actually get access to the data, and so one of the reasons why we're pushing so hard on the chief data officer is to make sure that we understand where our data are. Yes?
And Sue, I would just comment that the flexibility that we're building into our acquisitions and the agile nature of the agile development, sprint teams, et cetera, allow us to fail quickly. And if there's nothing more than a data-driven decision, it's one where you say, this isn't working for me. And you have that feedback loop happening constantly, whether it be with the analyst community or the technologists where they're not seeing the challenge met by the team. And you can fail quickly and move on.
Good deal. Okay, so we have time for one last question. And this is putting us on the spot. Is there a plan to create a method for small discretionary spending within mission scope so that users can get more access to products?
Well, I will just comment that on our current contracts and several that we have underway, we're building in flexibility into the CLIN structure and building what I'll call unpriced options or an IDIQ for those contracting geeks. CLIN structure where we don't know all of the requirements that might need to be satisfied in a business area, but we need to have the flexibility to turn those requirements into a contract action quickly. So by building these scope CLINs, contract line items, it'll allow us to be a little bit more fleet in getting them on contract.
Attention, please.
We're serious about this, and we're serious about it because we know that it is central to the vision that we all believe is just sitting out there to be grabbed. If you please turn in your scorecards, we will take those in. Participate in the things we have. Be honest with us when we have the drafts. I promise we'll come back next year and we'll give you a chance to rate us again. I believe that you will find that even we, my tough graders, will give us a better score. Thank you so much for playing with us.